Be a great matchup here. Both players at 6-1, so they have locked up day 2. But as you mentioned, these are some players that are really looking for more than just a day 2 conversion. Harlan Fear already has that classic win with this build at Delver, and I talked to Harlan a lot. He's a good friend of mine. We've played at Team Opens before. And every time this Azorius Delver deck comes up, I say, Harlan, it looks so bad on paper. And he's like, no, it's so good in practice, though. So I'm excited to get some action seeing the deck in practice.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't very indicative of how Source of Plowshares functions in most matchups, though. Source of Plowshares is generally really bad when you're in a racing scenario where you would absolutely want either something like Lightning Bolt to deal the last few points of damage, or to just kill a creature without them gaining any real traction. But Swords of Plowshares does bump them up in life. In this matchup, though, Swords of Plowshares is fantastic. Takes out Death Shadow or any of the other creatures, while also effectively invalidating any future Death Shadow.
Stein was on the play. He went to work, cycling 2 Street Race to 16, Underground Sea into Delver of Secrets. For Harlan, just a basic island as we go back Stein's way, and that Delver will transform to a Brainstorm.
Yeah, this is an ideal start here for Abe Stein, and with Harlan just on island on the other side, he doesn't really have to fear a removal spell. Going to crash in with that Delver of Secrets and put the pressure on. Can he put a follow-up piece of pressure on the battlefield? Another Delver of Secrets would be ideal, but just about anything is fine.
Yeah, fear to 17 off of that attack. Can't do anything like Wasteland that basic island, so Stein will have to turn to some other course of action on this turn. Bloodstained Mire is the land.
Notably, Harlan actually won the Legacy Classic, the most recent Legacy Classic, just a few weeks ago at our last Open with his Azorius Delver deck, defeating actually Ben Freeman in the finals. Now, I've been told that Ben Freeman conceded, but I like to think that Harlan would have won anyway, just because of how good Swords of Plowshares is against these Death Shadow decks.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. See, Stein went for that Brainstorm that was revealed to the Delver. Fear Spell Pierce that, and now here's a fetch for Watery Grave and Thoughtseize, which Fear is going to Force of Will pitching Spell Snare.
Now the question is, does Abe have a Daze? If Abe's got a Daze right here, that's bad news for Harlan, but I mean, he's got to be protecting exactly Stoneforge Mystic. I cannot imagine there's anything else.
Yeah, pretty strongly suggesting that. And in terms of cards in hand, Fear well ahead of Stein. Stein down to 2. Fear drawing up to his 5th or 6th card. Is going to start with a Flooded Strand on his turn, down to 15.
Yeah, and it looks like Abe took at least one mulligan this game. He is quite far behind, even after that Force of Will. He is pretty low on resources.
There is that Stoneforge Mystic.
Yeah, probably going to go get... well, I thought he'd get Batterskull just because of how good it is in racing scenario, but the Umezawa's Jite could potentially knock off that Insectile Aberration in a few turns. So,
yeah, got to figure that that was the justification there as we go back Stein's way. Stein is at 13 because of that fetch and that shock, so he's getting into Death Shadow territory. He's going to pay 4 life for Dismember on the Mystic. That'll put him there. He's at 9.
Yeah, and that unlocks any Death Shadow in my draw, but notably he's also got 6 cards in the graveyard, so a follow-up Gurmag Angler here would also be huge.
Aberration connects. Fear down to 12. No follow-up. We'll go back Fear's way. Has that Jite in hand. He's going to lead with a Ponder on this turn.
Yeah, just looking for any removal spell here. You know, definitely needs to take care of the Insectile Aberration before it gets out of hand, but for every like Source of Plowshares or something that he does cast, that's a removal spell he doesn't have later down the line for one of those larger threats like Gurmag Angler or Death Shadow itself.
The Ponder for Fear showed Stoneforge Mystic, Force of Will, Fetch Land, and he drew the Stoneforge Mystic, which he now is shuffling off a Fetch Land and casting, so he's at 11, resets off the Ponder. The Mystic's really the only card he wanted, but it gets caught by Daze.
Yeah, and that had to have been a peel off the top. That Daze on the previous few turns would have been back-breaking. But a Daze here on that Stoneforge Mystic is still quite good. And Harlan is facing down the barrel of a Delver of Secrets with just equipment and a land in hand.
Another attack for 3 from Stein. Fear down to 8. Bloodstained Mire, and there's Brainstorm. This one resolves.
Yeah, and he's going to leave him with 2 good ones. Shuffle away 2 bad ones.
I like that strategy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Makes sense to me. It's very similar to my sideboard strategy.
What? In the good ones, out the bad ones?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Tried and true.
I like it.
Giving that one way for free.
Harlan looks like he picked up a Snapcaster Mage here, but still needs to find some way to deal with this Delver of Secrets proper.
And here is a third Stoneforge Mystic. Can we get this one on the table and keep it there?
I mean, if I'm Abe, I'm not really fighting over this too hard. You can find a removal spell to kind of invalidate it on the next turn or two. The problem is, I mean, if his options are like Force of Will, you know, that's such a detriment to his development. And I don't know if he can really afford it.
Stein lets that one go. This one finds the Batter Skull. We don't know whether or not Fear still has the GT in hand. Oh, actually, we do, right? He has not Brainstorm. Stein is Brainstorm. So the hand has GT Batter Skull. It's been Ponders.
All right. Harlan actually passed his turn instead of just casting Umezawa's GT. I think that is
pretty telling, yeah, leaving up Plains Island.
Abe actually fetch shocking here. He wants to draw a big Death Shadow.
And the holdings are GT Batter Skull, Snapcaster Mage. Back over Stein's way. He's fetched and shocked down to 6. Feel like something big's coming.
Either that or he's just playing carefree with his life total.
Yeah, you gain it all back when your shadow gets hit by Swords of Plowshares anyway, right?
Yeah, that's true. A Dismember from Abe. He's going to go all the way down to 2 life here. He's got to be careful. That Snapcaster Mage could come down right here and just kill him.
Yeah, and that is the cast there.
Oh, he has the daze.
All right.
We got a game.
Yeah, still live here, and Fear is going to start his turn with the Ponder. He's at 5 after that Aberration hit last turn. There is a Source of Plowshares among those cards, a Spell Snare and a land as well.
Yeah, so he can go for Source of Plowshares right now, taking care of that Delver of Secrets. Next turn, draw the land, hard cast a Batter Skull. Even just hard cast the Umezawa's Jitte this turn if he so chooses. And now Abe back up to 5 life, so he's safe from an attack here from a Batter Skull in a turn or two, but he desperately needs to find another piece of pressure.
Yeah, so that Swords hit the Aberration. Both players should be at 5 now. Fear cast a Jitte, and I really like the way that Fear played there. Obviously, the Snapcaster was threatening lethal, but he's also in a situation where he's green-lit to Batter Skull into Daze because he's gone through the Dazes.
Right. Yeah, now, you know, the odds are pretty high that next turn that Batter Skull is going to come down. And it's going to either attack or block or both. And Abe needs to find some big threat to force a chump block scenario.
Here's another Brainstorm from Stein. Just 1 land on the battlefield currently after that Daze. See where he ends up here. Very precariously low life total.
Yeah, that Delver Secrets did quite a bit of damage to Harlan, but Abe's done all the damage to himself. Bunch of shocks, fetches, 2 dismembers, but that's how this deck is designed, using your life total as a resource, giving you the best possible chance to get those Death Shadows big. And a Thoughtseize here from Abe Stein sends him down to 2, but takes care of that very threatening Batter Skull, and Harlan just has a useless land on top of his library now.
Yeah. There's the Polluted Delta. He'll play it. He knows the top card of his deck right now is Spell Snare, likely to shuffle that one away.
You know, I'm gonna say something here. I mean it in a joking way. Don't change the order of your graveyard, Abe. you know, there's like 3 or 4 people just yelling in Twitch chat. That's not fair. You can't do that. And you know, they are technically correct, but in this case, this is the worst kind of correct.
I was scorekeeping for a time-shifted match where a player was using their graveyard a lot with Life from the Loam. Earlier today, it was Jonathan Orr. He was maintaining graveyard order, but man, it gets painful to watch them go through 40 cards every turn.
So my thing when I play Legacy, if my opponent ever brings up issue, I just say straight up, you know, if I show you another spirit, give me a match loss, okay? If any of it ends up mattering, you know, how about you play a not Scrabbling Claws? What's the one, the anti-graveyard one that matters? It hits the bottom card.
Phyrexian something or other.
Yeah. Man, I don't know.
I did not register Death Spark for this tournament.
Although that's a pretty nice one with Arclight Phoenix, right?
Yeah. Maybe I will register Death Spark for my next tournament.
And that's it.
Gurmag Angler for Stein, and Fear's got nothing on it.
Just a very well-played game by Abraham Stein and Harlan Fear. Both players, I think, played that game really well. But it all came down to whether or not Harlan Fear could do those last few points of damage. He's a Delver deck. He should be able to do a few points, but instead Abraham Stein able to systematically pick him apart using almost every bit of his life +3 from a Source of Plowshares.
I gotta say, Delver and Lightning Bolt are like chocolate and peanut butter, and Harlan's on like a chocolate and tea strategy or something. It's something weird. It's not the same.
Yeah, it's, I mean, some people, it's like a Coca-Cola and milk strategy for some topical humor. All right, so on the left side, or sorry, we'll start with Harlan. He's down a game. He's got his back against the wall. Let's list them off.
Yeah, needs some help. The options are 2 Containment Priests, a True Name Nemesis, a Gideon ally of Zendikar, 2 Flusterstorm, a Celestial Purge, 2 Surgical Extraction, 2 Disenchant, a Council's Judgment, an Engineered Explosives, and 2 Back to Basics.
All right, so I think Harlan wants to beat the control deck in this matchup. His back to basics are quite good here because they eventually lock out the shadow player. They can function pretty well off of a low land count, but every time they use their land, if it gets Stone Rain, that's a good way for them to lose pretty easily if the game goes longer than 5 or 6 turns, which it regularly does. Engineered Explosives, a fine card to help take out Delver of Secrets as well as Death Shadow. Council's Judgment can exile one of those big baddies in Gurmag Angler, but it also takes care of any potential weirdo sideboard cards like Liliana the Last Hope or Bitter Blossom that could come down. Don't much like Disenchant or Surgical Extraction, even though there might be some Bitter Blossoms. That's not really where you want to be. There might be a little graveyard stuff here and there. That's not where you want to be. Celestial Purge exiles most threats. I like it a lot. Flusterstorm can help win a fight over a discard spell to protect your Batterskull in hand. So I like Flusterstorm as well as True Name Nemesis, but not a huge fan of Gideon against the Daze decks.
Can be tough. Over on Abraham Stein's side, we have a Marsh Casualties, 2 Liliana the Last Hope, 3 Baleful Strix, interesting sideboard card, like it in this matchup.
Yeah.
2 Surgical Extraction, a Toxic Deluge, 2 Diabolic Edict, a Bitter Blossom, and 3 Ratchet Bomb.
So again, a lot of these like kind of lower to the ground aggressive blue decks in Legacy, because of how deep the card pool is, almost all of them have the ability to slow things down and win a longer game. Thanks to things like Force of Will, you're able to protect yourself. And so if you have something like Liliana the Last Hope to kind of grind out some little minor points of card advantage, whether it's the -2 or potentially just a +1 on a naked Delver of Secrets, there's a chance that Liliana can actually just run away with the game. So I like those coming in. The March Casualties are a great way to answer True Name Nemesis from the opponent. Baleful Strix, I'm actually kind of on the fence on. They are great when you're behind, but I expect Abe knows that the Azorius Delver deck is a lot more leaning towards the control side of things, thanks to Source of Plowshares. And additionally, the sideboard plan has to involve back to basics, and you can't really afford to tap out for Baleful Strix on the draw on turn 2. It's just not something you can do.
Yeah.
Toxic Deluge, maybe you just want everything to handle True Name because it's such a pain in the buns with your Death Shadows and Gurmag, so I might want that, as well as the Diabolic Edicts. And I think the Bitter Blossoms 100% come in. It's just a really tough threat for any of these mid-range blue decks to deal with once the game's slowed down.
Yeah. Really good insights there. And if you want more of Todd Anderson's insights, you want to get them on this very channel, every Tuesday and Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. You can check out Versus Live.
Yeah, and we're actually testing out the London Mulligan next week. So this coming Tuesday, make sure to tune in 1 p.m. Eastern. Ross Mayer and myself, we're going to bring you some hot, modern action in preparation for regionals, but with a little twist. We're going to test out the new London Mulligan rule that says you don't actually mulligan as normal. You just draw 7 cards again, and then however many times you did that, you throw a couple on the bottom of the library. I think it really benefits decks like Dredge. So we're going to be pushing it to the limit to see if it affects deck building and how much it actually affects mulligan decisions.
I know that it's in vogue to complain about this potential change right now, but I'm going to say that I'm pro London Mulligan.
No, for standard, modern, or no, sorry, for standard limited, I think it's an insanely good idea. I think it's one of the best ideas they could come up with. The whole problem with any sort of mulligan rule change is that you have to consider how it will affect how people build their decks. And if the mulligan rule makes people build their deck in a different way, that's a pretty negative thing to be adding to the game. With that said, I am all for a mulligan rule that helps standard and limited be awesome at the expense of having to ban a few random cards in older formats that abuse said rule. So for me, if it's too good in Modern or Legacy or Vintage, ban Bazaar of Baghdad, ban Faithless Looting, get out. No one cares. Get out of here.
No argument here. Players are underway in game number 2. Basic Island again for Fear. Nothing too exciting. Stein's going to shock for Watery Grave and then cycle Street Wraith. He'll be at 16. And Thoughtseize.
Yeah, this is a pretty easy spell pierce here. Harlan wants to protect whatever threat he's got coming down here on 2. But decides to just play land and pass. No follow-up. Might be playing around Daze. Might just be a handful of really controlling cards.
Windswept Heath was the play, and Fear has a Wasteland in hand. Declined to go for that Watering Grave. He's going to feel things out a little bit more. So we go Stein's way. Here's Thoughtseize. Ooh, Flooded Strand, Mystery Rainforest, Wasteland, Source of Plowshares, True Name Nemesis. So seems like Harlan was pretty heavily incentivized to try to get his mana online, but walking into this Thoughtseize is a problem for him.
Yeah, and his hand is pretty mana heavy, which is generally pretty good in these matchups because your opponent gets to hit you with things like Wasteland, and it makes Daze a little bit worse when you're able to hit all your land drops. With that said, you need something to do or some way to get a benefit from having all that extra lands, and right now Harlan doesn't have much of anything left.
True Name Nemesis was the take. Stein is to 14. Played a Plutus Delta for turn. On Fear's side, he's going to Wasteland the Watery Grave.
Now, the thing about using Wasteland aggressively is that if you're not putting pressure on your opponent and you also have like these more expensive cards in your deck, using your Wasteland should be a low priority. You want to make sure that these Wastelands are either eliminating your opponent from being able to play spells completely, or you're making sure that you're able to cast your spells later in the game. Now, here's an interesting thing, though. Abe actually decides to fetch up a Swamp. I don't love it, mostly because whenever my opponent has some number of Wastelands, there's a chance that you actually color screw yourself by exposing yourself to getting hit with a Wasteland when you don't have basics to fetch up other than just the one Swamp.
Yeah, so it's 2 fetches to 12 for Underground Sea Swamp, and the cast is Bitter Blossom. Does that change your opinion on maybe you'd probably in the second Underground Sea?
I would get the second Underground Sea, but Abe is cognizant of the card Back to Basics, so it's possible that the Swamp is the correct grab here, but if another Wasteland comes down from Harlan Fair, he's going to regret it. That Swamp we saw have a significant drawback earlier in the day out of a different Death Shadow deck, and it would have a likely effect here.
So back to Fear. There's a Brainstorm. That should clean the hand up. Plays an Island from hand and then sacrifices the Heath that's been in play. He'll go down to 19, finds Basic Plains.
Yeah, and Harlan here just kind of fetching towards a Back to Basics, hoping to find it off of one of these dig spells. Doesn't have it just yet, doesn't have much to do. Does have a Source of Plowshares in hand, but it pales in comparison to the card Bitter Blossom, and Abe Stein might run away with this game without having to play another aggressive spell.
Yeah, the Bitter Blossom is definitely a tough one once it's on the table. Fear kind of is in a territory where he needs to find some pressure, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Bitter Blossom kind of changes the texture of the game. And Harlan here, he needs to find another True Name Nemesis, maybe something like a Batter Skull or a Stoneforge Mystic so he can actually start applying pressure. But right now, Abraham's got the advantage for sure.
Bloodstained Mire, Death Shadow for Stein. Just a 2-2, but it's going to grow pretty quickly.
Yeah, and any pressure is good pressure at this point. It doesn't have to really do much of anything except help close the game.
Ponder for Fear, Swords of Plowshares, Spell Snare, Jace the Mind Sculptor. No thank you at all, though, as he's going to shuffle.
Holy crap, what? I guess none of them answered Bitter Blossom, but that was a powerful-looking Ponder to just snap shuffle away. Harlan here probably looking for one of his sideboard, like Engineer Explosives or something, or perhaps the Council's Judgment to take care of that Bitter Blossom, since he does have that Swords of Plowshares for the Death Shadow proper.
Yeah, he just needs something for the Blossom, right? And Jace does not cut it there.
No, it does not. Spy removal doesn't work. Sweepers don't even really work that well. Now, there could be a point where Abraham Stein gets so low on life that the Bitter Blossom can be detrimental. And in that scenario, there's a chance that the Bitter Blossom ends up being relevant for Harlan's side of things. But here I think it's just enough pressure. The Swords of Plowshares puts him back up to a healthy 13, or I guess 12. But
So Fear played a Flooded Strand, and then here's the Plow on the Shadow during Stein's upkeep. Gets a second Fairy token off the Bitter Blossom. Fear is at 20, but the advantage that Bitter Blossom accrues over time, it gets to be a lot pretty quickly.
Oh, absolutely.
Attack with the old Fairy token. Fear will go to 19 off of that.
I'm not positive, but I think I saw a Gideon in Harlan's hand.
That one also not necessarily great against Bitter Blossom.
Right. I could kind of match up a little bit, but the real problem is that a follow-up Death Shadow from Abraham is going to invalidate that Gideon pretty easily.
It is really nice for the Shadow deck that the Bitter Blossom is just kind of a free way to get you right back into Shadow range.
Right.
Gets to maintain this uncracked fetch land, so we can maybe combine that with another Brainstorm down the road.
All right. Harlan's going to play Jace the Mind Sculptor. Let's see if it resolves. Abe taking a good tank. This is a pretty important turn here for both players.
So Jace does resolve, and there is that Gideon in the hand, so he chose Jace over Gideon.
All right. Decides to tick up on himself. This is pretty aggressive.
A little scry action.
This is going to effectively save him a bunch of life points, though. But with the 2 tokens, the Bitter Blossom tick down, Abe can just fetch with a Bloodstained Mire and go get any of his lands that don't deal him damage and still be able to take care of that Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Yeah, we'll go Stein's way. There's another Fairy token. He's cracking his Bloodstained Mire. A shock for a Watery Grave would make the Death Shadow do most of the work on Jace. You know, it'd be trivial to attack the Planeswalker down this turn.
Yeah, and I think if I'm Abe, with the Bitter Blossom active, the easiest way for you to lose this game is for your own Bitter Blossom to kill you. So keeping your life total reasonably high, I think, is important.
And finds Underground Sea. So he's at 10. He still has 5 power of attackers for the Jace.
And even though the life total matters a lot for Harlan, getting that Planeswalker for the battlefield is hugely important. So you're going to see Abe almost 100% send to Jace.
And there's the attack. It's for 5. That's Jace's 5 loyalty. And then Hymn to Turok is the follow-up.
Yeah, this is a card that I have loved in main deck and sideboard games with the Dimir Shadow deck. Is these Hymn to Toroks, they play such a huge role in these fair blue on blue fights, as well as just being solid against combo decks.
Hymn to Turok taking care of Spell Pierce and Spell
Whoa,
Snare.
did you feel that earthquake, Ryan?
It was pretty devastating.
Whoa, man, the ground was shaking. No, it wasn't that someone bumped the camera. It was the earthquake.
Rough conditions in Syracuse.
Yeah.
Speaking of rough conditions, now Harlan's casting that Gideon. Does that do anything, Todd?
Well, remember when I said I probably wouldn't bring it in?
Is this why?
This is why. And, I mean, he makes it 2-2. And the 5/5 body can potentially be a pretty big threat here. But if Harlan wants to keep the Gideon around, he's effectively going to have to chump block this Death Shadow here. So, you know, we'll see how it goes. But that Bitter Blossom keeps ticking up. It's generated quite a few threats so far and continues to do so.
So Knight Ally for Fear. Stein makes another Bitter Blossom token.
Whoa, that would have been nuts.
Engineered Explosives
He was going for the
discarded.
kill. He was going for a straight sweep of them tokens and an attack with the Gideon for 5. Holy moly, that would have been insane.
Yeah, Stein breaks it up, though. That card's gone. Here's an attack at the Gideon. The Knight Ally dumps in front of the Death Shadow. And I think the fairies were all coming at Fear there.
We'll see. I think that it's a fine play, you know. The
Yeah, Fear to 14.
Huh.
And I think Stein has just established that, hey, your Knight's going to block my Death Shadow or now this Gurmag Angler every turn. Who cares? My fairies are going to kill you. Fear sees it. He's going to pick him up. Abraham Stein, 2-0 your winner over Harlan Fear.
Yeah, you have to remember there, the Azorius Delver deck